home, popularized by John Denver, paints West Virginia like paradise. But behind its reputation as one of the most beautiful landscapes in America, there is another reality, far quieter, hidden within the folds of the Appalachian Mountains. Here, small towns sit cut off from the map of progress, remote places where decline is not only measured by shrinking population numbers, but also by silent downtowns, rows of rotting buildings, and deep social and economic crisis. From isolated mining valleys in the far south to fading remains of steel industry glory near the northern border, we look at 15 towns in the Mountain State now trapped in some of the most extreme crisis narratives, shaped by geographic isolation and the collapse of the local lifelines that once kept them alive. First, there is a town with a fairly unique name, Tunnelton. The name is directly tied to the railroad world, taken from the historic B&O Railroad's Kingwood Tunnel. Located in Preston County, Tunnelton is a real example of a place dying behind the hills. Today, its town center feels almost like a ghost town, with rows of old brick commercial buildings whose windows are either broken or covered with wooden boards. Based on the local economic landscape, per capita income here sits far below the national average, driving an exodus of working-age residents until only around 200 to 300 people remain. The town is geographically isolated, and when the railroad industry and local mines stopped operating, Tunnelton lost nearly all of its lifeblood. Walking along its main street today brings only silence, old rusting vehicles, and the sight of aging yards in front of local homes. Next, only a few miles from Tunnelton, we arrive in Newburg, a small town that has suffered a similar decline, but with an even more extreme population drop. History records that Newberg was once a busy regional center with railroad shops and active coal mines. But as the world changed, life here changed drastically as well, and today it revolves mostly around aging infrastructure and limited public access. So why is this town described so negatively? Aren't aging infrastructure and limited public access fairly common in small towns? Yes, but the problem goes deeper. Poverty in Newberg has risen sharply because almost no new jobs have arrived, while its location inside a mountain valley discourages investment. On top of that, the town's history includes a major fire that destroyed much of its business district, leaving an economic wound that has never truly healed. Leaving Newberg, winding mountain roads take us deeper into the Cheat River Gorge, where Rowlesburg sits. As you can see, this town is highly isolated by geography, trapped between steep cliffs that make it vulnerable to natural disasters. Rowlesburg's story follows a different path. The town was devastated almost overnight by the Great Flood of 1985, which swept away many homes and local businesses. Modern census numbers show its population has shrunk to only around 200 people. Although the local community has made efforts to preserve its railroad history, daily life in Rowlesburg is now marked by wide empty spaces where houses once stood, along with a silence made heavier by the loss of major economic access after the flood. Then there is a place called Thornton. For those hearing about it for the first time, Thornton is no longer a town with an active local government, but a remote, unincorporated community along a mountain route in Taylor County. Here, the line between settlement and abandoned forest becomes very blurry. Life feels extremely quiet. with old wooden houses standing far apart from one another behind the trees. One unique fact about Thornton is the remains of its fire brick industry, which was once well known across West Virginia. When the brick plant closed decades ago, Thornton lost the only reason it existed. Today, the area is little more than a silent pass-through place, with no business center, no grocery store, and only a handful of older residents still holding on in near total isolation. Now we shift far south, cutting through the hills of McDowell County to see Gary. This town tells one of the most dramatic stories of corporate collapse in Appalachia. Built by the industrial giant United States Steel in the early 20th century, Gary was designed as a modern mining town that housed thousands of workers across many mine sites spread along a remote valley. But when the company decided to shut down mining operations on a large scale in the 1980s, Gary's economy collapsed almost instantly and on a frightening scale. Today, dozens of company-style wooden houses stand rotting beside cracked roads. Gary has become a symbol of coal's collapse, leaving behind a geographically isolated town with often unreliable clean water infrastructure and very limited emergency services. Still in the same county, at the southernmost edge of West Virginia, the town of War carries a deeply grim reputation. This is often described as one of the towns with the most extreme structural poverty in the United States. Its geography is intensely remote, sitting at the bottom of a deep valley surrounded by vertical cliffs. Recent census figures show a bleak picture. More than half of the population lives below the poverty line, and its median household income is among the lowest in the state. On top of that, reaching modern healthcare can require hours of driving through difficult mountain terrain. The town's struggles are clearly visible in its aging downtown facades, quiet streets with little economic activity, and heavy dependence on government assistance because of the lack of local jobs. Next, as the county seat of McDowell County, Welch stands as a grand monument to rural-urban decline. From the 1930s through the 1950s, Welch was so prosperous that it was nicknamed Little New York because of its crowded streets, multi-story buildings, and even the first municipal parking garage in the state. That glory disappeared as coal mining became mechanized and mines began to close. Welch today stands in sharp contrast to its past. Its population has shrunk by more than 80%, leaving behind a downtown filled with grand but empty brick architecture. The dense town layout inside a narrow valley creates a claustrophobic feeling for anyone who visits. Major retail stores have long since left, leaving the town to struggle with small-scale crime and the addiction crisis that often affects former industrial regions. Moving to Fayette County in central West Virginia, we find Ansted, a town perched on an isolated plateau near the cliffs of New River Gorge. Although the surrounding region has begun growing as an outdoor tourism destination, Ansted itself remains trapped in heavy economic stagnation. The town's crisis comes from a mix of past industrial pollution and the closure of local commodity mines. Daily life in Ansted moves slowly, with high unemployment. Many young people choose to leave soon after graduation because there are no strong industrial or service sectors to absorb workers. Along its main road, for sale and for rent signs on old commercial buildings have become a common sight, increasing year after year. West Virginia's crisis is not caused only by economics, but also by repeated natural disasters, as seen in Richwood in Nicholas County. Located remotely near the edge of Monongahela National Forest, Richwood was once a prosperous lumber processing center, home to the world's largest wooden clothespin factory. The town's darker story reached a peak in June 2016, when a devastating flash flood destroyed much of its infrastructure, including local schools and dozens of businesses. The loss of capital and population after the disaster has made recovery extremely difficult. As a result, the riverfront areas of town are now filled with empty concrete foundations where homes once stood, while downtown looks tired, with remaining buildings still showing signs of water damage. We return to the northern region to look at Grafton in Taylor County, a town that records the fall of the railroad transportation industry. Grafton was built on steep hillsides along the Tygart Valley River, a layout that makes it look unique but difficult to access. Downtown Grafton is filled with large 19th century Victorian buildings, showing that this area was once a major center of wealth for the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad. Unfortunately, changes in national logistics made the glory of the railroad fade. Today, downtown Grafton feels cold and quiet, with rows of multi-story buildings whose upper floors now sit empty. High poverty rates and urban social problems have become daily challenges for the older population that now dominates the town. As a contrast to the smaller towns around it, Kingwood, the county seat of Preston County, offers another view of crisis in a remote region. Geographically, Kingwood serves as a service center for the surrounding rural area, meaning it is not as empty as Tunnelton, but its darker story lies in long-term economic stagnation and its position as a center for regional crisis. As the local government center, Kingwood becomes a gathering point for social problems from the surrounding area, from high welfare assistance claims to heavy pressure on the local legal system caused by socioeconomic struggles. Its downtown still has activity, but many of the surviving businesses are thrift stores, law offices, and small lending agencies, reflecting the weak purchasing power of the local community. Now we move to the northern panhandle, the narrow strip of West Virginia along the Ohio River. Here stands Wellsburg, a historic town founded in the late 18th century. Wellsburg is not isolated by wilderness, but economically isolated inside a fading industrial region. Constant population decline over the past several decades has turned this once active river port town into a quiet place. Many old Victorian-era homes in Wellsburg are now poorly maintained, with peeling paint and yards overtaken by wild brush. The lack of new investment along the Ohio River corridor has trapped Wellsburg in a cycle of economic decline, where local businesses close one by one as the population continues to shrink. Only a few minutes north of Wellsburg, Follansbee shows a different visual form of crisis: pollution and the remains of heavy industry. This small city grew around coke and steel processing plants. For years, heavy industrial operations in Follansbee left major environmental impacts, creating a narrative of poor air quality and contaminated land around the factory areas. When environmental regulations became stricter and global steel competition intensified, factory operations dropped sharply, triggering mass layoffs. Life in Follansbee today is shadowed by the giant rusting steel structures along the river, creating a massive but quiet industrial landscape. in sharp contrast with the visual pollution left behind for the residents who remain. Continuing north, we arrive in Weirton, perhaps one of the most extreme examples of industrial city collapse in the entire United States. One unique fact about Weirton is that it is the only city in the United States located between two other states, bordering Ohio to the west and Pennsylvania to the east. The city was completely shaped by Weirton Steel Corporation, which employed more than 12,000 people at its peak. But when the steel industry collapsed, the entire city fell into crisis with it. The giant factory area, now mostly demolished or left to rust, has created a deep wound in the middle of the city. Losing its largest tax base made it difficult for Weirton to maintain road infrastructure, while its old shopping centers have turned into wide, silent, empty parking lots. The final city is Wheeling, located just south of Weirton. To understand the scale of Wheeling's crisis, we have to look at its history. The city was once West Virginia's first capital and one of the richest industrial centers in the state in the early 20th century, driven by textiles, steel, and tobacco. Wheeling's decay has happened on a massive scale. Its population has dropped sharply from around 60,000 people at its peak to fewer than 26,000 today. In some districts, you can see a dramatic contrast between grand 19th century architecture and its current abandoned condition, with broken windows and wild plants growing through the structures. Although revitalization efforts exist in certain areas, many outer parts of Wheeling still struggle with poverty, high vacancy, and the shadow of a former glory that may never return. These 15 towns in West Virginia give us a full picture of how regional decline is often the result of extreme geographic isolation, combined with total dependence on one industry in the past. When that industry leaves, or when nature strikes with disaster, what remains are empty spaces, aging historic buildings, and communities cut off from the mainstream flow of progress. In the end, the negative narrative attached to these towns is not a final judgment, but a reflection of how a region struggles to survive at the lowest point in its history.